Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be showing you what can cause a misfire and rough running on the N52 engine. Now, a lot of you who would have watched my rough idle fix, the update is not the only thing that's going to cure your misfire. Now, if you have got a misfire or rough running, that will just cure it if all the relevant parts are replaced at the same time to make the car benefit. Now, as you know, other parts fail and an update is not going to cure these parts. So if that's what you're thinking, it's not going to happen. Secondly, all the parts I'm going to show you, do not try and use cheap parts, do not try and use Chinese parts. Every part that I fitted on my 530i, every part is from the dealer. I haven't bought no Chinese parts, no second-hand parts off eBay. Every part I have bought them from the dealer, meaning i.e. solenoids, spark plugs, coils. Now a lot of you will say, why would you pay their prices? Why? Well, in the UK it's called I have a trade account. I get it for half the price. So if solenoids are £240, I get them for 140. If spark plugs are say £60 for all six, or £70, I get them for like 40 quid. So you've got to see the difference. That's why I buy it all from the dealer. The coils, for example, were meant to be £180 for all six. I only paid £90. That's how it works with trade discount. Now a lot of you don't have that, but that's down to you to source and sort out. But I do not recommend using Chinese parts, as the parts cannot regulate even at the current that the car wants or the DME requires. So therefore, you need to use proper, genuine BMW parts to stop your rough idle and your fixes, because you can go and do the update, replace these parts, and you'll still suffer it. You have to use BMW parts. Since I've used BMW parts all on my car, I don't get none of the fault codes that half you message me asking, why have I still got this fault code after changing fan or solenoids? And please, I keep hearing this another thing, stop cleaning the solenoids. That doesn't work. That is being cheap. You cannot maintain these cars cheap. I know on Nathan's channel, he brags about you can own these cars cheap. You cannot own these cars cheap. Take my word from being in the UK. These cars are not cheap to maintain. And whoever's telling you they're cheap to maintain, it's not the case. The N52 does not like cheap parts. This is not the N54 engine. This is the N52. Even same as the N54. You go and buy a copy high pressure fuel pump. I guarantee you'll go through all that headache to go and fit that, and then it will fail again. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you everything on the E61. We're going to use the E61 example of the N52 engine, because that one, as you know, needs valve stem seals. Now I have put the Forte seal conditioner in just today as we speak, and that should be doing its job. I believe it already is, as the idle's getting better now and it's stopped leaking oil into the combustion chamber. So it's already working, and we've already drove it like 40 miles and it seems to be okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you on the N52 what to look for rough idles and what caused them, and also vacuum leaks. Now I just want to stipulate that regardless of you trying to have the update thinking that's going to solve it to save yourself a bunch of money, that might not solve it. Now obviously I'm going to show you the parts that you need to replace before you even think of considering the update for the car, because the update is not going to work and then you're going to feel like it hasn't worked, when in general it will work if you replace these parts. Now the first thing that fails on these is the ignition coils. They fail, and in turn when they fail they give you a engine management light, and you'll know when the car's misfiring because it will just feel down on power, and also like it's stuttering and sputtering from the back of the exhaust where one of the coils ain't firing properly. That's your first thing. Next thing that can go bad is the spark plugs. Now the best way to check if they're misfiring is to take them out, and you'll see if they're coated in like a liquid or fuel or oil, and you'll know if they're not firing properly. If they're not, replace them. You can easily unscrew them. You've seen my videos, you know how to take them out. The next thing on these cars on the N52 is you want to check the grounds for the spark ignition coils itself. The ground, as you can see here, grounds here. That bolt's loose, or any of the bolts loose, it will cause fluctuation between all the coils and give you a misfire also. The next thing that can cause a misfire, the injectors not firing at the correct rate as what the car requires. They can cause issues. So you need to check them. The way to check them is take this off and pull them out and see if they're dirty, and if they're spraying, to do a test on the bench. Okay, the next thing, Vanos solenoids. As you know, these have been changed, and the reason I'm using this car is a complete example. We changed them for so-called Febby Bilstem, and you would not believe it, these ones are giving problems. Now, based on that problem, and because they're giving problems, that is why I don't recommend using Chinese parts, and that is why now the only way I'm going is OEM, which is BMW's ones for their cars as they recommend, because these can't give the amount of power that the adjusters want to the top here as the DME's trying to push. So they're the most common cause for misfires on these cars, and when they start going bad, so do the ignition coils, because as they fail and you're trying to press down the accelerator to advance the timing and the car's trying to inject more fuel, These are working harder to burn that unburnt fuel off because these ain't triggering the advancing the timing properly. So when all they end up failing. The next thing you're going to want to look for is your CCV and cracked vacuum lines. As you sort of go in my video as well, you know I replaced all this, so that's lovely jubbly, but it wasn't when I took it. And as you saw in my intake manifold video, when we took this off, the hose down here was cracked, where someone had removed it to replace the starter motor and they didn't put it back properly. That will leave the car running rough and causing misfires because it's letting unmetered air without going through the MAF sensor. Another thing just about to say about it, the MAF sensor. Now them can cause misfires, lean running, and all sorts on these cars. I've seen them where they sometimes don't even cause the car to start because they'll start and the car will just cut out because it's not running off the MAF sensor and it needs to run off the MAF sensor. But trust me, by disconnecting it, this car will not run properly because this is used for the solenoids as well in turn. The solenoid uses the MAF sensor to direct the air, amount of air, and the same for the disc flap. This can also cause, if stuck open or failed open, that will cause misfires and rough running completely because the flap ain't closing when the car is running, which is meant to close. It's not meant to be open, it's meant to shut and stop the air going, so the air just goes through a certain amount of cylinders when it's idling, because it only uses 3 cylinders to keep the car idling. It doesn't use all 6, so that's got to stay shut. The next thing on these, and the most common problem on these, is fuel filters. In the USA, you lot get a lot of the crappy fuel, so your fuel filters end up getting clogged, and that in turn will clog your fuel lines and clog the whole car and cause it to run rough. Now when it causes to run rough, it ain't putting the right amount of fuel in the engine, which in turn will cause misfires. Check your fuel pump, which is underneath the seats in the back of the car. I think the next thing on these, it will be the Valvetronic motor. Now if these ain't been relearned and you haven't relearned this and readjusted it after changing your rocker cover or your valve cover gasket, this will cause misfires because that enables the turning of the eccentric shaft and what angle it's meant to be in and what day to lock the cams down to advance the timing. Now if that isn't relearned properly or the stops ain't learned, that will cause misfires as well. So make sure you have this relearned if you ever do a job where this requires taking off, and that only up to 06. From 07 you could just use the ignition key and cycle it twice, ignition on, ignition off, and it will relearn the steps on its own. But on 06 you need to relearn them by computer. Same for E90, same for E60, E61, all of them are the same. The next thing, eccentric shaft sensor. If that goes bad, which I advise changing in when you've got the rocker cover off, but I didn't because as you know, there's a lot of refurbished ones. Now me, as I told you guys, I will not use refurbished parts or old parts on the car that I don't believe are going to last long, or I won't use cheap parts just to replace a part. If it ain't a proper part, I won't change it, and therefore I couldn't find one decent price, the genuine BMW one, so I didn't do it. Now this monitors the crankshaft's angle, and the angle is meant to be at when to advance timing. When that goes bad, that can cause your car not to start and also to run completely rough and burn a lot of fuel if that ain't working properly. I've seen it where this one doesn't even allow the car to start at all when that's gone bad, the eccentric shaft sensor. Above all else guys, as I say, most of the things are covered, so you know about the CCV. If that ruptures, that can cause rough idle and misfiring and also increase emissions. I've told you about the eccentric shaft sensor, told you about the Valvetronic motor that can cause it. The disc flaps, if you've got 2, be careful of them, they can cause it. You might replace that one, and then what you don't know is there's one under there if you've got the 3-stage manifold, and that one causes rough running. The MAF sensor. Also check the intake boot, as you lot guys will know when you take it off, check because it splits, but it don't usually happen on the N52, but it's still possible. Check for a dirty air filter, that can also cause rough running because a lot of people get a lot of crap in them and then clear the box out when they change the air filter. Next thing, running lean and running rich and misfires could be your O2 sensors as well. They can cause rough running and like lean running, depending on how they are. They could be clogged up from oil and running with oil. If your car's been misfiring and burning oil too much thanks to a blown PCV, they can get clogged up in oil and then cause the car to run rich or not respond correctly and cause a lot of different codes. They can even cause misfires, as I told you. Apart from that guys, everything else has been covered on this car. As you've seen now, those are the most common problems on these cars for the misfires and the vacuum leaks. There's not many on the petrol engine. If it was a diesel engine, I'd be running you through a load of different vacuum lines because, as you know, under the manifold there is a hell of a lot of vacuum lines that run from the engine to the fuel filter, to back to the engine, to the turbo, to the crankcase and everywhere else on the car, and to a load of filters and to a load of diesel lines. So there's a lot more on that car than there is on these. But as you can see, the petrol engine is covered. These are the most common causes of rough rough idle. Do not be fooled. There's nothing much else that can cause a rough idle on these cars apart from them problems, and I've come across every problem on my N52 and sorted them. Now my car drives like a dream. People are talking to me about oil leaks as well, and they're losing oil. If you're losing oil, check your PCV. If that ruptures or keeps getting stuck closed, that'll throw the oil back into your cylinders, and it just can't pull the amount of vacuum from the crankcase that it's requiring to pull the oil back from the manifold back down to the sump. Check your sump gasket as well for oil leaks, and obviously, as you know, check your valve cover, check everything, check your oil filter housing. They can cause oil leaks as well. Just check the normal things on BMWs. Their gaskets are not that good, so this is a good video for you to see what you need to change on the car. Like I say, BMW's gaskets, don't trust it. If you're going to get any kind of gaskets like valve cover or anything, get Victor Reigns. They're the only ones I highly recommend. They're the only ones that can withstand the job. Or L-Ring is another company that do it. But as I say, guys, that is the majority of all the misfires there. So as you see, guys, there you go. There's all the misfires and the vacuum leaks that can happen on the M52. I hope this will help you, as I don't think anyone's done a video for quite a few years now regarding this, and people are still searching and always asking me. But please be warned, my update for the rough idle fix will not work unless you replace these parts, because you will not benefit from it. The update is not going to help you with your Chinese parts. It's not going to help you with your refurbished parts. If you're going to do anything, do me. Buy it all from BMW. BMW is the only place I recommend to buy parts. I don't usually recommend parts very much, but as I say, BMW parts, you can't beat them. And you got to think, yo, people moan about spending $200, $300 on the parts on the solenoids, but when they're going to last you 100k of not getting incomplete fault codes and keep having keep clear codes from the cheap solenoids that you're having to keep clearing, and you've replaced them, and then keep asking people why you keep getting these codes after you clean them, just replace them and you'll get your money back after 100k miles with no problems. Why keep replacing for cheap when you could just do it once and that's it and get it over with? I don't understand people like that. Clean them does not work. It doesn't matter how much you do it. People will tell me, oh, they're red on the front, a guy does it and he swears by it. Well, that's like me telling you, would you swear if the guy jumped in the road and got run over and he survived, would you believe that and still go and do it? No, you wouldn't. So there's your answer. You're not going to believe people that say this and that on the forums. People tell you whatever they want. He probably cleaned them once, and then nobody ever found out if it's still happening. If you message him today in 2009, let's see if his solenoids are still doing that. Impossible. To clean them does not work, and everyone who done that that so-called trick online and showed videos of doing it made a lot of views, but listen, none of it works. I'm telling you that now. The only way to get around them is replacing them for brand new ones. That's it. Instead of being cheap, just replace them. There's no cheap on BMW. BMW doesn't come cheap, and that's what I try and explain to a lot of people. These cars are not cheap as people think. If you want to look after them right and you want them to run right, you cannot be cheap with them. And if you want them to run like crap and you want them to not be let down in power and not run the way we run them in the UK, well then by all means run them on cheap parts and let your car keep failing. But if you want it to run right, follow my guide, and I'm telling you, replace it with BMW parts. That's it for today, guys. It's BMW Dr. Dean here. Hope this video is going to help you, and goodbye.